I was 70 when my world tilted on its axis. My name's Margaret Thornton, but everyone calls me Maggie, and for 30 years, I'd run a small craft shop in our town, teaching knitting and sewing, stitching love into every quilt and scarf. My home, a charming two-story with a wraparound porch and ivy climbing its brick walls, was my sanctuary, paid off through decades of careful saving with my late husband, Tom. He'd been gone 6 years, taken by a sudden heart attack, but his memory lingered in the garden trellis he'd built with his carpenter's hands. In the oak table where we'd planned our budget, in the cozy living room where we'd laughed over coffee. I'd joined Tom's family when his daughter, Rachel, was just 10, her mother gone to cancer. I raised Rachel as my own, teaching her to thread a needle, cheering at her dance recitals, sacrificing to fund her art school dreams. I thought we were close, thought she saw me as family, not just a stepmother stepping into her life. That summer, my 70th birthday felt like a milestone, a chance to celebrate with the family I'd nurtured. Rachel and her husband, Greg, offered to host a party at my home, and I was touched, thinking it was their way of giving back. I'd been supporting them financially for years, paying the $2,000 monthly mortgage on a house I'd co-signed for them, a gift to help them build a stable life. Over 2 years, I'd spent $48,000 from my $700,000 savings, easing their burden so they could focus on Rachel's art career and Greg's startup dreams. I baked my favorite lemon cake for the party, its citrus scent filling the kitchen, and set out Tom's old china, the plates we'd used for family dinners. The porch was alive with family and friends, the air warm with laughter and the sweet perfume of my rose garden. I wore my best cardigan, knitted myself, and felt a glow of hope for our family, believing Rachel valued the love I'd given her. As we gathered for gifts, the mood shifted. Rachel handed me a small, brightly wrapped box, her smile sharp, almost predatory. I opened it, expecting a scarf or a photo frame, something thoughtful. Instead, I found a dog collar, cheap, plastic, the kind you'd find in a pet store clearance bin, its gaudy pink studs glinting under the porch lights. "You deserve this," Rachel said, her laugh cutting through the chatter, loud enough for everyone to hear. Greg chuckled beside her, his eyes glinting with amusement, and the room fell silent, guests shifting in their seats, their faces a mix of shock and discomfort. My cheeks burned, the collar heavy in my hands, a cruel jab at my role in her life, reducing my years of love to a punchline. I forced a smile, my voice soft despite the sting. "Very funny, Rachel," I said, setting the collar on the table, my heart pounding with humiliation. The party limped on, but the joy was gone. I served cake, my hands trembling, feeling like an outsider in my own home. Later, as I cleared plates alone, Rachel and Greg laughing with friends outside, I overheard Greg on his phone in the garden, his voice low but clear. "Yeah, Maggie's still paying the mortgage. We're pulling $1,500 a month renting out rooms, and if she sells her house, we can cover the rest of our debts." My breath caught, my fingers tightening around a stack of plates. They'd been secretly renting rooms in the house I was funding, pocketing the money while falling 3 months behind on the mortgage, $6,000 in arrears I'd unknowingly covered. Worse, they were planning to pressure me to sell my $600,000 home to bail them out, assuming I'd comply to keep the peace. My savings, carefully built with Tom, were safe, but I'd co-signed their loan, tying my name to their debt. I stood in my kitchen, the betrayal heavier than the dishes in my hands. Rachel's dog collar, Greg's laughter, and their secret rentals weren't just a prank, they were a calculated dismissal of my love, my sacrifices. My home, where Tom and I had planned our future, where Rachel learned to sew, was my sanctuary, and I'd given them everything to build their own. Now they saw me as a cash machine, a pushover to mock and exploit. The heartbreak was raw, a weight in my chest, but it sparked a stubborn defiance. I'd spent decades teaching others to create, to stand strong through challenges. I wasn't done yet. I called my financial advisor, Ellen, a friend who'd shopped at my store for years. "Ellen, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. That night, I sat at Tom's oak table, a notebook open before me, its pages once used for shop inventories. I started sketching my fight, my heart set on reclaiming what was mine. Rachel and Greg thought I was too old, too soft to notice. They didn't know Maggie Thornton, and I was ready to remind them who I was. "Quick question, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Drop a comment, I read every single one. While you're here, a like and subscribe would mean so much, it tells me you're with me." Let's continue to the story. The morning after Rachel's cruel dog collar gift and Greg's mocking laughter at my 70th birthday party, I woke with a fire in my chest, the sting of their betrayal sharper than the humiliation I'd endured in front of family. Their secret scheme, renting out rooms in the house I was funding with my $2,000 monthly mortgage payments while plotting to push me to sell my home, was a wound that cut deeper than I'd ever imagined from the girl I'd raised as my own. My two-story home, with its ivy-covered porch and Tom's hand-built garden trellis, was my sanctuary, built through 30 years of running my craft shop and saving with my late husband. They thought I was too trusting, too sentimental to notice their greed, but I'd spent decades solving problems, teaching women to stitch strength into their lives. At 70, I was sharper than they knew, and I was ready to protect what was mine. I brewed coffee, the familiar ritual grounding me, and sat at Tom's oak table, its surface etched with memories, Tom sketching trellis designs, Rachel practicing her first stitches, me balancing shop accounts late into the night. That table anchored me, a reminder of what I was fighting for. I called Ellen, my financial advisor and a longtime customer at my craft shop, who'd managed my accounts since Tom's passing. Her voice was tight with anger when I told her about the dog collar and Greg's overheard phone call. "Maggie, that's unconscionable," she said, pulling up the mortgage records. She confirmed they were 3 months behind, $6,000 in arrears, despite my payments, and had earned $4,500 renting out 2 spare rooms in their house. "They're also talking to a realtor about your house," Ellen added. "They're saying you're ready to downsize, to cover their debts." My stomach churned. My home, worth $600,000, was their fallback plan to erase their financial mess, and I'd co-signed their mortgage, tying my name to their failure. I spread my financial records across the table, their pages a map of my life with Tom, every dollar saved from my craft shop, every penny from his carpentry jobs. My $700,000 savings were secure in a trust, and the house was in my name alone, fully paid off since 2004. Rachel didn't know the full extent of my finances, assuming I was just a retired shopkeeper with a modest nest egg. Now I saw their greed clearly. They thought I was an easy mark, a widow they could mock with a dog collar and manipulate for cash. I asked Ellen to gather evidence, rental listings, mortgage payment records, realtor emails, without alerting them yet. "I need every detail," I said, my voice firm. "Every dollar they've made, every lie they've told." Ellen called back that afternoon with more. "They've been advertising the rooms on a rental app, pulling in $1,500 a month for 6 months, she said. "They've also met with a realtor, offering your house for $620,000, claiming you're struggling to manage it. They've got a brochure for a senior living facility ready to show you." My jaw tightened at the thought of my home, where Tom and I had danced in the living room, where Rachel learned to sew, reduced to a paycheck for their mismanaged dreams. I told Ellen to keep monitoring their accounts, documenting every transaction to build a case for fraud. "Let them think they're winning," I said. "I want the evidence airtight." I called David, my lawyer, who'd handled Tom's estate with precision. I told him about the dog collar, the rentals, and their plan to sell my home. "Maggie, you're healthy and sharp as a needle," he said, reviewing my records. "We can revoke your mortgage payments, demand repayment of your contributions, and place a lien on their house to secure what you're owed." I told him to start a trust for Rachel's future children, locking my home and savings away. "Make it untouchable," I said. "And fast." David promised to have the trust ready in days, adding, "They picked the wrong woman to mess with, Maggie." I drove to Ellen's office that afternoon, the summer air warm through my car window. She showed me the rental listings, photos of their spare rooms, furnished with my old quilts, advertised for $750 each per month. My $48,000 in mortgage payments had funded their scheme, while they fell behind, risking my credit as co-signer. Worse, Ellen found a forged document, signed by Greg, claiming I'd agreed to sell my home to cover their debts. "It's fraud," she said. "They're banking on your silence." I told her to prepare to stop the mortgage payments and file a lien, keeping it secret. An idea took root, a community craft studio in my home, teaching knitting and sewing to local women, preserving my passion. I'd fund it with my savings, seek grants, and make it a legacy for Tom, for every woman I'd taught. I kept Rachel and Greg in the dark, nodding when they called with fake concern. "Maggie, that big house must be a lot to maintain," Rachel said one evening, her tone too sweet. Greg suggested I look at senior apartments, for my comfort. I murmured I'd think about it, buying time while David worked on the trust and Ellen gathered evidence. Every night, I sat at the oak table, sketching plans for the craft studio, workshop schedules, yarn supplies, community showcases. The betrayal hurt, Rachel's dog collar a vivid wound, Greg's laughter a deeper cut. But it fueled me. I thought of Tom, his pride in my shop, his love for our family. They thought I was a relic, a means to their ends. They'd forgotten the woman who'd built this life, stitch by stitch, lesson by lesson. I was Maggie Thornton, and I was already crafting my comeback, one quiet thread at a time. 2 months after Rachel's cruel dog collar gift and the discovery of their scheme to rent rooms in the house I was funding, I was stitching together a plan as carefully as I'd once crafted quilts for my shop desk customers. Their betrayal, mocking me in front of family and pocketing $4,500 $500 from secret rentals while falling behind on the mortgage I paid, was a wound that cut deeper than I thought possible from the girl I raised as my own. My two-story home, with its ivy-draped porch and Tom's hand-built trellis, was my sanctuary, built through 30 years of running my craft shop and saving with my late husband. Rachel and Greg thought I was too soft, too lost in memories to notice their greed, but I'd spent decades teaching women to create strength through their hands. At 70, I was sharper than they knew, and I was ready to turn their plan into my victory. I started each morning with coffee at Tom's oak table, its worn surface a testament to our life, Tom sketching trellis plans, Rachel threading her first needle, me tallying shop receipts. That table grounded me, a reminder of what I was fighting for. David, my lawyer, was moving fast on the trust, securing my $600,000 home and $700,000 savings for Rachel's future children. He called one morning with an update. "The trust is nearly done, Maggie. Your assets are locked, and we've added clauses to protect any new ventures tied to your property." That was my spark, a vision to transform my home into Thornton Craft Studio, a community space to teach knitting and sewing, preserving my passion for creating. David loved the idea, promising to handle legal details and explore community grants. "They underestimated you," he said, and I smiled, feeling the fire of defiance grow. I met with Ellen, my financial advisor, at her office, the air smelling of fresh coffee and printer ink. I shared my plan: stop the mortgage payments, demand repayment of my $48,000 in contributions, and start the craft studio. Ellen nodded, her eyes sharp. "They've earned $9,000 from rentals now," she said, showing me updated listings, 2 rooms in their house, advertised with my old quilts, pulling in $1,500 a month. "They're also pushing harder with the realtor, offering your house for $620,000, saying you're too old to manage it." My jaw tightened. Ellen confirmed they were 6 months behind on the mortgage, $12,000 in arrears, risking my credit as co-signer. She'd found a second forged document, signed by Greg, claiming I'd agreed to gift my home's equity to cover their debts. "We can stop the payments and file a lien on their house," Ellen said. I told her to move forward quietly, gathering more evidence, every rental payment, every realtor email. Ellen dug deeper, uncovering a trail of deception. Rachel and Greg had met with a developer, offering my home's equity for $200,000, claiming I was ready to retire to a senior facility. They'd even prepared a glossy brochure for a nursing home, left subtly on my counter. "It's fraud, Maggie," Ellen said. "They're counting on you staying quiet." I told her to prepare the lien, ensuring I'd recover my contributions, and to keep it secret. David confirmed the forgeries were enough for legal action, but I wanted to wait, letting them think they were winning while I built my case. The trust was nearly complete, the lien paperwork ready. I allocated $15,000 from my savings to start the craft studio, keeping costs low by using my home's spacious rooms. I pitched Thornton Craft Studio to the community center board, framing it as a gift to local women, a place to learn knitting, sewing, and the confidence that comes with creating. I'd seen women light up when they finished their first scarf, just as Rachel had once beamed at her first quilt. My home was perfect: the living room for workshops, the porch for summer sessions, the attic for storing yarn and fabric. The board was thrilled, offering a $12,000 grant to start, with more possible if it took off. I invited trusted friends, retired seamstresses, local artisans, former customers, to join. We planned workshops on quilt patterns, knitting techniques, and community showcases, naming it Thornton Craft Studio to honor Tom and our shared love of creating. My home would be a haven, not a cash cow for Rachel's greed. I kept Rachel and Greg in the dark, playing the part of the compliant stepmother. They'd call, their voices dripping with false concern. "Maggie, that big house must be hard to keep up," Rachel said one afternoon, her tone too smooth. Greg suggested I look at senior living, for my health. I murmured I'd consider it, buying time while David finalized the trust and Ellen prepared the lien. Every evening, I sat at the oak table, planning the studio, workshop schedules, supply lists, showcase ideas. The betrayal hurt, Rachel's dog collar a sharp memory, Greg's laughter a deeper wound. But it fueled me. I thought of Tom, his quiet pride in my shop, his love for our family. They thought I was a relic, a means to their ends. They'd forgotten the woman who'd built this life, stitch by stitch, lesson by lesson. The town buzzed with excitement about the studio, volunteers offering fabric and time. Ellen sent updates on Rachel's rentals, each dollar a brick in my case. The trust was days from completion, the lien ready to file. Rachel and Greg thought they'd won, but they didn't know Maggie Thornton. I was weaving a new future, one where I'd come out on top, and I was ready to pull the thread that would unravel their scheme. 3 months after Rachel's cruel dog collar gift and the discovery of their scheme to profit from my mortgage payments, Thornton Craft Studio was ready to come alive. My two-story home's living room was set with tables for knitting workshops, the porch lined with chairs for sewing sessions, and the attic stocked with yarn and fabric. I'd stopped the $2,000 monthly mortgage payments on Rachel and Greg's house, filing a lien to secure the $48,000 I'd contributed. My $600,000 home and $700,000 savings were locked in a trust for Rachel's future children. Ellen, my financial advisor, had proof of their $9,000 in rental profits, while David, my lawyer, held evidence of their forged documents claiming I'd sell my home. The community center's $12,000 grant and my $15,000 investment had the studio poised to launch. I was ready to turn their greed against them, and I did it quietly, like the seamstress I'd always been, stitching strength into every move. I'd kept Rachel and Greg in the dark, letting them believe I was oblivious while they rented out rooms and pushed me to sell my home. They'd grown bolder, leaving senior living brochures on my kitchen counter, Rachel's voice syrupy as she suggested I downsize for ease. Greg stopped by one afternoon, eyeing the trellis Tom built, saying I should clear out old stuff to simplify. I nodded, said I'd think about it, and changed the topic, my heart steady despite the sting. Ellen confirmed they'd escalated their plan, meeting with a developer again, offering my home's $200,000 equity, claiming I was too frail to manage it. The forged documents, two now, both signed by Greg, were their attempt to force a sale legally. But I had my own plan, and it was about to unfold. I invited them for dinner, saying I wanted to discuss family matters. I spent the day cooking Tom's favorite roast, the kitchen warm with the scent of garlic and thyme, a recipe we'd perfected together. I set the table with his old china, the plates we'd used for Rachel's teenage birthdays, for anniversaries with Tom, for every moment that made us family. They arrived at 6, Rachel in a sleek jacket, Greg in a pressed shirt, both exuding confidence, as if they'd already won. Rachel chatted about their rental income, Greg hinted at my big house being too much for me. I poured tea, kept my voice light, and let them talk, their smugness fueling my resolve. They thought I was a relic, a stepmother lost in nostalgia, not a woman who'd taught generations to create with their hands. After dessert, blueberry cobbler, Tom's favorite, I cleared the plates and slid a folder across the table. I've made a decision about my plans, I said, my voice calm but firm, like I was teaching a new seamstress to thread a needle. Rachel opened the folder, expecting a senior living pamphlet or a financial pledge. Instead, she saw the trust documents, the mortgage bill showing $48,000 owed, the lien on their house, a flyer for Thornton Craft Studio with my name as founder, and copies of their forged documents, Greg's signature glaring on the page. Greg's teacup froze halfway to his lips. Rachel's smile vanished, her hands trembling. "Maggie, what's this?" she stammered. I leaned back, folding my arms. "I've stopped paying your mortgage and filed a lien for the $48,000 I contributed. My home and savings are in a trust for your future kids, untouchable. I know about the $9,000 you made renting rooms, the forgeries claiming I'd sell my house." I nodded to the doorway, where Ellen stood, unannounced, holding rental listings and bank records. "Your accounts are frozen," Ellen said, her tone sharp. "The fraud's reported, and the police have the documents. You're facing charges unless Maggie says otherwise." Rachel's eyes welled up, her voice breaking. "Maggie, we were just trying to get ahead, for our future." I cut her off, my tone cold. "By mocking me, using my money, forging my name. I raised you better, Rachel." Greg mumbled about misunderstandings, but I pointed to the door. "Get out. Until you learn respect, you're not welcome here." They left, Rachel weeping, Greg's head bowed, the door closing softly behind them. I exhaled, my heart steady despite the pain. I'd raised Rachel, loved her through every dance recital, every heartbreak, but she'd chosen greed over family. I didn't feel triumph, just clarity. The next day, I threw myself into Thornton Craft Studio. I set up the living room for workshops, invited retired seamstresses and artisans to join, and planned sessions on knitting scarves and sewing quilts. The community center approved another $8,000 grant, and volunteers brought fabric and needles. The betrayal hurt, Rachel's dog collar a vivid wound, Greg's laughter a deeper cut. But it had pushed me to create something lasting. I thought of Tom, his pride in my craft shop, his love for our family. They thought they could diminish me, use me. They'd forgotten the woman who'd built this life, stitch by stitch, lesson by lesson. That night, I sat on my porch, the trellis casting shadows under the string lights, and opened my notebook, planning the first workshop. The community buzzed with excitement, volunteers eager to help. Rachel and Greg's fraud was unraveling, their accounts frozen, their plans crumbling. I was building a legacy, one they couldn't touch, and I was ready for the next step. I was Maggie Thornton, teacher, creator, fighter, and I was ready to show the world what I could do. Thornton Craft Studio opened its doors a month after I handed Rachel and Greg the mortgage bill, their stunned silence no match for the fire they'd sparked in me. At 70, I stood on the wraparound porch of my two-story home, its ivy-covered bricks glowing under string lights, as women of all ages gathered for our first knitting workshop. The living room hummed with tables piled with yarn and needles, the attic transformed into a fabric library, and the air carried the scent of my rose garden, a nod to Tom's love for quiet evenings. I'd stopped the $2,000 monthly mortgage payments on their house, filed a lien to secure my $48,000 contribution, and locked my $600,000 home and $700,000 savings in a trust for Rachel's future children. The community center's $12,000 grant, plus an additional $8,000, and my $15,000 investment had launched the studio. Rachel's dog collar and their fraudulent scheme had cut deep, but they'd rooted me deeper, pushing me to create a legacy no one could unravel. I wasn't just surviving their betrayal, I was thriving. The opening workshop was a celebration, the kind Tom would have loved. We held a knitting session in the living room, with a young woman named Clara mastering her first scarf, her fingers clumsy but determined as I guided her with the patience I'd honed over decades. My friends, retired seamstresses, local artisans, former customers, filled the room, their chatter warm as they swapped stories of their own creations. Ellen, my financial advisor, raised a glass of cider, her eyes bright. "Maggie, you've woven something extraordinary," she said. David, my lawyer, hugged me, whispering, "You turned their cruelty into strength." I smiled, my throat tight, wishing Tom could see it. He'd have been out here, sketching trellis designs for the studio, charming the women, his hand steady on mine. Thornton Craft Studio was more than a workshop, it was a community, a place where women stitched confidence into their lives. We offered free classes, funded by grants and donations from families I'd taught over the years. There was Clara, who came weekly to learn quilt patterns, her notebook filled with sketches and ideas. There was Evelyn, 78, a former tailor who taught sewing basics, her laughter lighting up the porch. We hosted monthly showcases, women displaying scarves and quilts under the string lights, sharing stories of their craft. I led classes 3 times a week, teaching knitting techniques and sewing skills, my hands as steady as they'd been in my shop days. The studio wasn't just about crafts, it was about giving women a voice, a purpose, a place to belong, something Rachel and Greg had tried to strip from me. Rachel and Greg were gone from my life, at least for now. A week after the confrontation, they sent a letter, full of apologies and excuses. Rachel claimed the rentals were, to get ahead, the forgeries of misunderstanding. Greg said their startup had collapsed, their accounts frozen, their debts piling up without my mortgage payments. I read the letter, then set it aside, unmoved. Respect wasn't a scribbled note or a plea, it was a way of life, and they'd chosen greed over it. Ellen told me their rented rooms were vacant, their car repossessed, their plans unraveling under fraud investigations. I didn't gloat, it wasn't my way. But I didn't reach out, either. Rachel was the girl I'd raised, loved through every stitch and milestone. But she'd have to earn her way back, if she ever could. My new family was the women knitting scarves, the volunteers organizing showcases, the community clapping under the porch lights. The town embraced the studio, with more women signing up weekly, some for knitting, others for sewing, all for the connection of creating together. We started a summer program, teaching advanced quilt designs and hosting community craft fairs. The community center promised another $10,000 grant to create a digital archive of local patterns. My $700,000 savings were safe, the studio breaking even, my home alive with purpose. Rachel and Greg's betrayal, the dog collar, their fraud, had hurt, a wound that ached when I thought of the grandchildren I hadn't yet met. But that pain had sparked a fire, one that built Thornton Craft Studio. One evening, I sat on my porch, the trellis casting shadows, planning the next showcase in my notebook. Women lingered in the garden, sharing cookies, their laughter bright. I taught a quilt pattern Tom had loved, feeling his presence in the warm air. Rachel's cruel gift, Greg's laughter, had been a deliberate attempt to diminish me, to use my love for their gain. But they'd only made me stronger, pushing me to create something lasting, something that honored Tom, our family, and every woman I'd ever taught. I wasn't just Maggie Thornton, retired shopkeeper. I was Maggie Thornton, teacher, creator, unstoppable. The stars twinkled above, and I smiled, my fingers tracing the notebook's edge. The women waved goodnight, their voices echoing across the garden. I waved back, my heart full. Thornton Craft Studio was my answer to betrayal, my proof that creativity and resilience matter, that I was still here, still rooted. Rachel and Greg had tried to mock me, to steal my future, but they'd only fueled my resolve. My home was a haven, my crafts alive, and I was just beginning to weave the next chapter for myself and the women I served.